Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of the Project Infinite podcast, the podcast covering basically just Batman right now. This is sounding a little different. It's because it is different, because it's not going to be a regular episode of the podcast. It might be like a little, 15 minutes or so, because we just saw the Batman.
We're finally getting our pull as a huge monumental podcast on the Coliseum of podcasts.
Yes, so we are recording this on Tuesday, March 1st. We saw the Batman a little early.
We just got out of the theater maybe an hour ago.
Yeah.
And we raced here just to record this for you guys.
Yeah, so this is going to be a non-spoiler review of the Batman, so that's why it's obviously going to be a little bit shorter than every episode we've ever done, and why it's not a real episode, because it's just going to be kind of our random thoughts and reactions to what we just witnessed, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson. What did you think?
Man, I really, really like this movie. And I think to go farther, I'm thinking about filmmaking 24/7. So, I mean, my biggest takeaway from this, I have two. One is how intentional this movie is. Just down to all the filmmaking in it, all the shots in it are just, you feel this planned nature of it and you feel this world. That's what I really love and enjoy about this. I mean, Matt Reeves is one of the most talented filmmakers in Hollywood right now, and he doesn't feel that Hollywood pressure. He feels very outside in. He feels very somebody that, has a vision and purpose in what he does and really wants to tell a good story first and foremost. He's not looking for money. He's not looking for fame. He's just looking to be a storyteller, a modern day storyteller. And I think he deserves to be put on that upper echelon of filmmakers. And I hope this I know his career is really solid after those Planet of the Apes movies, but I really hope this is the one that really, catapults him into like that, the absolute top tier nature of everybody. And then my other takeaway is, it's my guy, Robert Pattinson as Batman. I mean, I was saying in the car ride home, that's Batman. Like, there's so much of Batman in this movie. I think that's something that's really well done, is understanding of where he is in his journey. I think a great people might have is how little Bruce Wayne's in this movie. And from my perspective, that's honestly a good thing. When you look at where we are with the story, it's an evolution. I said that to you before we hopped on. This is where my perspective lies, and like what a big theme that I think people are going to talk about. It's the evolution of where these characters are. We're in the beginning of it. So he really is just Batman right now because he only sees the purpose in being Batman. What purpose do you have if it's your second year? It's not his 10th year. It's not his 20th year. It's his second year being back in Gotham after training with Alfred and then going abroad to train. And you could really feel that training in this movie too. You really feel that without seeing it. So I really love him as this iteration of Batman. I mean, he's so menacing. Like, there's points in the movie he just crawls out of shadows in this movie, and it's like, this is something where you really feel the comic book nature of it mixed with this realism. It's probably some of the best I've ever seen, period. Because the Nolan movies were very grounded in the grounded nature, and the Affleck movies, like you said before, are very comic booky because they need to stand up to beings like Superman and Wonder Woman. But this feels like the Batman animated series. It feels like comics, because I've been reading a lot of Batman comics. Like, I felt that just with his presence in the movie too. So that's where I'm at. I think this is a really great display of filmmaking on top of just a really good narrative as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, that was my biggest takeaway from it. It's what I describe it as the perfect marriage of the Nolan films and the Affleck films, in terms of it's just grounded enough that it feels like it could take place in the real world, but just comic booky enough that lets you know that it's a fictional one. That's my biggest kind of takeaway. And if you're listening to this after the Batman preview episode, one of my barometers was, it has two bars, right? That one that it probably absolutely does need to clear, and one that would be nice to clear, and that is this the best Batman movie featuring Batman, right? And we made this delineation months ago in what the best Batman movie was, and that was Batman Begins, because it's the movie that feels like Batman's the most in control of the movie, right? And I think it cleared that bar. As far as being the best Batman movie. And then obviously the second bar is, the Golden Chalice, right? The Dark Knight. Does it reach that level? I don't know. I think I need some distance from it before I make that conclusion. If not, it's damn close. I'll say that. It's a movie that, while Paul Dano is great, he doesn't overtake Batman in it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really smart too, because that really offers the delineation between The Dark Knight and this, because obviously we always go off of your movie's only as great as your villain, and I don't think that's necessarily true, and this shows it. Your movie's always as good as, you know,
Your movie.
Your movie. That's how it should go. And you really feel that through Matt Reeves' vision in here. There's this tension over this movie that's just like, it's so unmistakable, and it's just it's everlasting. From the opening scene to the last second of this movie, you don't know what's going to happen, and it's not even the narratively, you don't know what's going to happen. I think you made the point that's really good. You didn't know if there was like going to be an explosion at any random second. Like, there's like this fear, and it's like, if you think about it that way, that's very self-aware of itself too, of who Batman is. It's like, you also put the audience in how the criminals of Gotham feel, because they're always in fear. You're always in fear that something's going to happen, just like they are. The opening of the movie does that really well. Without spoilers, it's a really good representation of, and it also plays into the year 2 aspect of, like, they've now become accustomed to, like, they cannot just run rampant in Gotham as much as they want, because they're always thinking that something's going to pop out of the shadows.
Yeah, the opening establishes the tone of this movie well, which is tension, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of tension surrounding the Riddler. There's a lot of tension surrounding Batman. It's really an interesting case of the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. That's where Riddler and Batman kind of come to terms with each other. Right. Is you never quite know who has one up on whom in this movie, which is great. It's great. I think I could categorize this movie as a thriller and a mystery.
Yeah, it's like a crime noir mystery thriller. And I just want to talk about Paul Dano for a second. I did have one gripe with it that I'm going to save for the spoiler review. I mean, just to like gloss over it real quick. It's the ever-present that he was in Prisoners, but more specifically that he was in There Will Be Blood. There is a scene in the movie that I won't go into, but that I can really feel like Paul Dano showing through instead of it being the Riddler. And I just could only think that's because of his past roles that he got to that point. But I mean, it just immediately, that kind of gets washed away when you just get entranced by his performance, because there's this like, this unease that you get from him at all points in the movie. And he's not like Killer Croc or Mr. Freeze or, you know, Joker when he's surrounded by like thugs or what, like, he's just a regular guy like that. He's just a regular guy that's just, you know, has this path of vengeance that he's on, and that just can never be broken. No, whether he dies or not, he kind of labels himself as a martyr more or less. But man, Paul Dano himself he's so it creeps me out. Like, it's his physical acting more than his line delivery. Yeah. His line delivery is great. Yeah.
But it's just certain faces that he makes. It's a scene in the trailer that you see more of, obviously, from him being apprehended in the diner. Mm-hmm. There's a wry smile that crosses his face that just creeped me out.
Because you know what that also shows? It shows control, that he has complete control over the situation. And honestly, I can see some people not definitively loving the ending of what happens because of that whole nature of he has control over everything too. Because people might feel how they felt at the end of Dune, as it doesn't feel as finished as normal, which I think is going to be an interesting reaction for like what's like the general public sees this movie, because it's not like a Marvel movie where you get a definitive, you know, happier, more or less ending, or even some of the DC movies they've done. This isn't as, you know, clean cut black and white of like a great, like, you know, storybook ending. But that's Batman. I mean, he has that I can't even go into it, but he has a really good monologue at the end of the movie where he kind of sums up his journey that he went on and the journey that Gotham City needs to go on.
Let's quick hit a couple of these other cast members. Zoe Kravitz.
Wow.
Selena Kyle. I mean, you don't have a lot to go on. You have Michelle Pfeiffer, you have Anne Hathaway. This is probably the most comic book accurate Catwoman that we've got.
Right. And it's honestly a lot of new age. And you know what's funny? In this whole thing, kind of her connection to everything else that's going on in Gotham City, because that was one of the concerns I had, like how is she going to connect to like this bigger overarching story that's going on, because this really is a lot of inspiration from Long Halloween. She definitely fits in there, and you feel, it's funny, I was just reading Long Halloween, and in the first issue there's this great panel, it's like a full page panel where she's jumping off the roof and Batman's chasing her. I'm like, I feel that tension between the two of them, and like they're magnetic together, like they need to be together, and you feel it. It's a lot of Tom King's Batman, the newer age Batman that we've been getting over the last 2 years of like, it's like, can they be together? You kind of get like I said, it's like the beginning of the evolution of what they could be and what they might be.
Yeah, she's great. They give her a really great, compelling kind of character arc that's kind of happening in the background of what's going on in this movie that I really admired, and she is just as much an important character to this movie as Batman is.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that I think The Dark Knight Rises missed, was Catwoman felt kind of convenient and like a throwaway.
Right,
and
it's just somebody that's there, because what happens a lot is like these two movies are, you know, slightly similar. I mean, the ins and outs are very different, but in terms of having like this big overarching conspiracy that we've kind of put together from the trailer, that there's something bigger going on in Gotham. Same thing with, you know, Bane kind of, you know, finishing Ra's al Ghul's plan. Catwoman was just there, you know what I mean? Like she was just kind of thrown in there to be helpful to Batman and be like this almost like side character in a video game, but Zoe Kravitz is very much like she's thrown into this, she's not thrown into the story, she's neatly placed in this story, and you really need her to kind of, you know, pass everything by, and that's the true tell of a good story. Like there's no scene that feels out of place. I personally wouldn't change it. I mean, if I were to change anything, it would be nitpicks. It would be small nitpicks, but like overarching, and I think that's how we need to start thinking about stories, is like, you can nitpick all you want, but like the overarching story was very solid. You know what I mean? Like, and I think she fits in there really well. I mean, she's just, it's somebody you can't help but like be drawn to every time she's on screen. And then
which is what Selena Kyle is.
Right,
there's an enigma, you know, all pun intended, with the Riddler being the main adversary in this movie, but she's this charming enigma that you can't help be as entranced by as Bruce is. You know, when you know how interesting she is, right? Because you don't really know what her game is, right? And that's Catwoman,
right? And talking about characters that you're kind of tranced by when they're on screen, I mean, Colin Farrell as the Penguin, it might be the best example of that. And it's funny, I heard a lot of people saying that this was their standout from like the press screenings, and I have a different standout actually. But no, Colin Farrell was really, he fits the role of like being, like I said, it's just this evolution piece that you keep going back to. It's really well done. You kind of get the ins and outs of, you know, him wanting to kind of prove himself as not this, like, you know, this big, not hulking figure, but like this figure that's like kind of deformed and like, you know, might not get the respect that they deserve. Like he needs to do stuff to get himself to the top. It's very alike to the arc that the Gotham Penguin has.
I was just about to say that.
It feels really similar, but this one does a really good job, and I can really tell that Colin Farrell's going to get, he's going to get his show apparently on HBO Max along with the Gotham PD show. So I can really, you feel it, like you can kind of feel this mob boss kind of growing. Maybe like that Soprano comparison we made for Book of Boba Fett. It's probably going to be better with Colin Farrell. But my standout in this movie, surprisingly, is John Turturro as Carmine Falcone. I thought he was placed perfectly in the story, and kind of alluding to like the Long Halloween kind of arc that they went on. He just gives a really, it's like the most tamed I've ever seen John Turturro. Yeah. And it's probably some of my favorite outside of like The Big Lebowski or something like that. Like he's really good, man. He understands like that, like, I can't be this loud crime boss that like flips tables and like sends people, like that's where the believability comes in. It's like, that's probably not what crime bosses do. I don't know any crime bosses, but I'm pretty sure they don't, you know, go out going crazy. Like, they probably have people do it, and I'm very subtle in what I do, and you can feel that from him.
Yeah, and they make mention of that throughout the movie, that Carmine Falcone is kind of the mob boss in the shadows. Like, he can go out in public, too. Yeah, John Turturro is really good. There's you know, Riddler has this unsettling madness, and Carmine Falcone has this calm kind of not madness, but calm control.
Right. It's like the organized crime. He's very organized. He's very put together, and he's very in control of everything. Like Riddler's in control of everything in a very
because his mind just works
right,
in a totally different frequency.
Right, like an anarchic way, but Carmine Falcone, it's really what makes Batman comics really, really great, is what I was thinking about through this movie too. Like, it's not, it's like Batman comics work on 3 levels. It's always the crime-oriented way, and it's the rogues way, and then it's the Justice League way, like him being the human in the Justice League, then it's him having to deal with all these rogues that may or may not be there because of him, and then it's the crime, like the actual Gotham part of it, which like he like you genuinely cannot fix. It won't happen. It's like he says in the trailer, like it's a cesspool, like I can't do anything about it, but I can try to give the city hope.
Yep. Who else? Jeffrey Wright.
Yeah, Jeffrey Wright.
Jim Gordon.
I've been on a Jeffrey Wright hype train for so long, ever since No Time to Die, and then I saw French Dispatch. But man, Jeffrey Wright, I'm telling you, it's his voice. That's what really pulls you into any performance that he has. He has a really definitive voice, and just such like a voice that just rings in your head. So like, I love in the funeral scene where he's kind of calling out to whoever's in the car, and just like that's Gordon to you. Like, it's somebody that's like, they can't help but let their good nature show no matter what's going on. It's like the perfect match for Batman, because like he understands, like, I can't do this like he even saw throughout the movie how out of control everything really was behind his eyes, and like he needs somebody like Batman by his side. Like, it's the perfect good cop bad cop situation.
Yeah, he's as good as probably people expected him to be. He was like one of the ones when they cast him, they were like, yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Makes sense.
Right.
He was great. I said to you earlier, we haven't had a lot of live action Gordon Batman because no place for it.
Right.
So our only thing to go on really is Bale and why am I blanking on the actor's name who plays Gordon
from the 90s?
No, The Dark Knight. Gordon. Gary Oldman.
Oh yeah, Gary Oldman. Yeah, of course.
So I think the chemistry in this, again, going back to your Batman animated series analog, it feels very that.
Right, like
between Gordon and Batman.
This like feels like comic Gordon to me. Like, it's like I said, I was just Year One is probably the best example of like, if you want like a pretty Gordon centric story, because the story is supposed to counter between the two of them. It's like Gordon arriving in Gotham the same time Bruce, comes back to begin his crusade as Batman. But this Gordon, you can like understand, like, there's really no way out, but he gives that city hope, because he will do the right thing no matter what. It does not matter how the odds are stacked against him. This is something that you can kind of rally behind. And he kind of gets the other cops in Gotham to be like, hey man, we need this extra bit of help. Like, you see how outnumbered and outgunned we are. Like, if Batman's on our side, this can't be the worst thing.
Yeah. And then rounding out Andy Serkis as Alfred.
Very Batman Earth 1. So Batman Earth 1 is kind of a different take on his origin. And it's more of Alfred's more inserted into like the ascension of Batman, along with like, he's more with Thomas and Martha Wayne, which you get from this movie too. Like, it's not just like he was just the butler that arrived at the house. Like, you get the impression that like he had more to do. It's more Gotham Alfred than anything else. So even down to the cane that he uses, it's very Batman Earth 1. But no, Andy Serkis is as good as Andy Serkis will ever be. It's like kind of like it's like De Niro being in a Scorsese movie. Matt Reeves has got to use Andy Serkis, but no, he's really good. If I had
to sum up his performance, it's powerful. Everything he says in the movie feels important.
Yeah, he needs to stand up to Bruce, because that's usually what happens. Is like Alfred always stands up to him in a very like, I can be your surrogate father, like a little bit more comforting. But this Alfred is very like, you need to get your stuff together. Like, you need to understand there's bigger things than even what you're trying to do. Like, there's other factors that play into everything that we're trying to do. So Andy Serkis he's really good. He understands the test of what Robert Pattinson's Batman is, and like what he's been through, but also like what he hasn't seen yet, and like what he needs to go through yet, like, and how much that he had an effect on him too. And like, he knows things that he doesn't know, and that's fine. It's like he understands that he's not his father. And he never will be, and it's just kind of like this like sadness that comes with that.
Yeah, it's a character arc more than a story arc.
Yeah.
I think is what this movie boils down to, and that's my favorite kind of movie.
Yeah.
Is a character-driven narrative, and that's what this is. This is the characters. The characters are what make this story go forward.
Yeah,
the story doesn't carry the characters.
That's Batman. That's Batman comics to a T. That's comics in general, because it doesn't say like, you know, only in like the older comics did they say like adventure comics or, you know, like Tales to Astonish. Like, it's Batman detective like it's that, like, and that's what this really is. It's Batman's journey of, you know, finally facing what we would believe to be his first adversary, because that's what it really feels like. This is the first time he's like faced one of his, like, you know, one of his rogues, and he's kind of got the ins and outs of like other rogues that are running around too. Like, you really kind of, and by the end of this movie, you really feel that, like, that it's really starting to formulate like what Gotham really will become and like what he needs to be in Gotham now.
Yep.
Yeah, he really goes, like, Batman himself goes on a really good arc in this movie.
Agreed. I guess that's all we can really say.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple other things. I mean, Greg Fraser's cinematography is just, it's top notch. And I was thinking about this, like, I don't think people think he's extremely versatile, because he just came off Dune, which is a completely different kind of narrative that you're dealing with. And like, when I talk about like narrative, people are like, well, camera work and narrative aren't the same thing. It's what visual storytelling is. Like, that's the marriage between the two of them. So you really like can feel like how different these two worlds are. And it's just like a test of like how good he is. I mean, Roger Deakins, who's like the grandfather of cinematographers, he said it best. Like, my camera work and like what I do should never overshadow what the director's vision is. Like, I should always fit into what they're trying to do. And that Greg Fraser's a perfect example of that. So hats off to him. And I mean, Michael Giacchino's score is just, I dare to say it's iconic, and it's only been out for like a week. And once this movie hits like general release, like, I think people, it's so simple too. I think that's really,
it's just those beats.
Yeah, it's just those, yeah,
that you hear in the trailer, that boom, 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 boom. But they use it, it's used in a variety of ways in this movie. Sometimes slow, sometimes faster pace.
Yeah.
It's a versatile piece.
Yeah, it's really good when it's used in non-fight sequences, because now you have to get creative in the way you use it for Batman specifically. But the other themes...
And it amplifies the tension.
Yeah, there's something that I will tell you when we hop off and when we get the spoiler review, because there's something that I caught because I was listening to the full theme for somebody's theme in that movie, and I thought, I was like, wow, that's really well done. It's like a really solid Easter egg. But yeah, no, this movie was... in terms of like reaching hype. I mean, it's funny that you said the whole thing about, you know, the tears it needs to hit. I was watching this movie and I was like, I didn't even want to think about that. I just wanted to watch a good movie. And I think this is one of the best movies of the year so far. And I know the comic book genre, and I'm one of the people, I don't like to call it the comic book genre, because I don't think it's as simple as that.
It's not.
I just really wanted a good movie that I can sit and watch, no matter if it was Batman or anybody else. It didn't matter if
you don't feel the runtime.
No, you don't. And I think what helps that is that tension piece. It's like, if you're on the edge of your seat, then you're not going to feel how much time is kind of passing. It's going to kind of, you know, aid that a little bit. I mean, the performances are all just incredible. Everybody weaves with each other very well, because there's times where, like, especially when you go to, like, if you want to look at Marvel as the comp, there's times where it's like, once you get these really big actors and they start to hit each other, you can feel like the actors themselves hitting each other a little bit. But this, I never felt that. Like, everybody was in character to the fullest. I mean, that's a really good testament to how good the actors you have, but even more so the director you have behind the camera. That's what really it comes down to as well. Yeah, Matt Reeves is really a visionary. I think that's the best way to explain it. This Gotham City is the perfect blend between Gothic and it's like, even down to like the costume design, like, it's the perfect example of like how comics work, like the whole Nathaniel Richards thing. It's like, you don't know what time period you're sitting in. Like, it could be the 60s or it can be 2022. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you don't ask that question because how well the world is lived in.
Yeah, and just, man, I think the thing that's going to stand out to me the most, and it's kind of the overarching theme, is tension.
Yeah.
You could feel it in the theater. Like, there was no clapping or hooting and hollering. There were a couple laughs here and there when there were, you know, jokes being...
Which is for any movie.
Yeah, but other than that, it felt like the audience was on pins and needles.
Yeah, I love that. Like, this is a film. You know what I mean? Like, I know somebody made a really good point that, like, a lot of times what happens is, like, films will be like, they'll shoot it, but they'll shoot it in like massive green screens, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, they'll shoot it on massive green screens and then it'll be sent off to somebody else. And like, obviously the director will be there with the editor, but like they shot everything. Like every shot feels so specific. Like even down to the opening shot, like everything feels planned. Everything feels storyboarded. Like I can really feel like they didn't go. And even if they did go on set and say, you know what, let's mess around with this a little bit. You don't really feel that. Like you can never tell like the difference between the two. Like, even down to the lens choices, I'm pretty sure they used an anamorphic lens just because how shallow the depth of field was. Like everything around it was very blurry. Like it really caused you to focus on like the main subject in the piece, and if you're talking about a Batman story, that's what you really want. Even whoever's on screen, but like Batman specifically, like whenever he walks into frame, it's just you feel it. That's what I really like about Robert Pattinson specifically. Like Ben Affleck, like I said, the thing that it doesn't go as much for that is because he already had Superman in his world, so we already had the being in that world, and like Bale was supposed to be the realism, like the truest form of like if it were to happen today. But I don't know. This feels real. This feels extremely real.
It's a lot of him looking at things and us looking at him.
He doesn't talk a lot.
No.
And he does a lot of acting through his eyes too. He's such an incredible actor. Like it's just. Guys, go watch any other movie that's not named Twilight with this guy in it, because man, that guy can act. I mean, I think Matt Reeves said he watched Good Time and he put Robert Pattinson on the short list to be Batman as soon as he saw that, and I can immediately see it. It like I said, it's because of his eyes.
Yeah. I don't think this movie's going to disappoint people. That's just my kind of one sentence takeaway.
Yeah. Like if you're a Batman comic fan, this has got something for you. If you're a film fan, this has got something for you. Even if you're a general person that's just like, oh, it's Friday night, let's take the family. I don't know about the family as much. Yeah, I don't know about the family as much.
It's PG-13, but it's pushing
R. It's the most.
The only thing that keeps it from being R-rated, in my opinion, is it doesn't on-screen show you the violence that occurs.
Yeah, because if it did, it would just be easily R.
A lot of the violence that is shown is implied.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of like the squishiness.
But it is brutal.
Yeah.
It is. This movie
it'll make
is
you
brutal.
wince.
Yeah. There was one specific in the movie where I was like, oh wow, we really are doing this. I know it's PG-13. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah. But yeah, that's gonna do it for us. A little quick one. This will be up a little bit later in the week from our regular episode, which airs on Wednesdays. And then tune in next week for our full review, where we can unleash a little bit and take the reins off and really dive into this movie. Because
tell people Ben Affleck was in this movie.
Come on, man.
Nah, I'm joking.
But yeah, so tune in next week for our full review of the Batman. We just wanted to hop on and give us our quick reaction. We literally ran in here to record this, so
everything was fresh for you guys.
Yeah, so this is our genuine reaction to what was a really, really special movie.
Yeah, that's what I think. This movie's special. This doesn't feel like, even just for movies in general, that's what I really want to get to. Like, not just comic book movies. This is just a really, really well-made movie.
Yeah.
And I think something that might stand out. I mean, I know award seasons are going to roll around next year. I would not be surprised if this movie tried to sneak in some places. So that's the echelon that I'm going to put this on. It's really well made. Really well made, really well acted.
I agree 100%.
Really solid story.
All right, guys. We will see you next week for the full Batman review. Until then, you can follow us on Twitter at ProjectINF_pod. You can follow us on Facebook, like us on Instagram at
the Project Infinite Pod. I was definitely not yawning.
Yeah, it's very late. But yeah, I'm not going to go through the whole spiel because we save that for the regular episodes. So until then, see you next week. Goodbye.
Peace.